Hi guys, tonight we get to talk about animal health. I'm really looking forward to it because that is one of my favorite topics beside nutrition. So, anyway, when you talk about animal health, one of the most important things that I will say that I have learned in my life and I would like to share with you, and hopefully you'll kind of understand what I mean. Obviously, this little calf isn't feeling very well. He's very sick and he could die if he's not treated. But there's a thing that's called the eye of the master. And the eye of the master was a term that was taught to me years ago by a former MJC instructor. And that means that you are the owner of the livestock and you have to be observant. And if animals aren't feeling well, they do talk to you. They don't talk to you in their voice, but they talk to you in their actions. So this little calf was probably sick several days ago, but whoever was in charge didn't notice that he wasn't feeling good. And now he's probably severely dehydrated. Obviously, I don't know if you can see because I'm in the way here. He has a very bad case of scours. He's very lethargic, and a calf this sick could easily die. So remember that term, the eye of the master. And it's the person who owns the animals and how much they observe them. Because with the animals, you don't really get a second chance. They get sick and they can they can die very easily. So you have to be the one to, understand what symptoms of sickness are. Anyway, so disease is a disturbance in the structure or function of any organ or body part, any deviation from normal. And so that is part of the eye of the master, is looking for those little signs of sickness. And a lot of times, I will tell you this, you should trust your gut. Trust your gut. If you think the animal isn't acting right, it probably isn't. But sometimes we're just too busy. I just don't have time to take care of that right now. And the next day it's worse, or the next day the animal's dead. So, that eye of the master and looking for that normal versus abnormal behavior. And I will tell you this too. I know I'm talking a lot right now, but I will tell you that certain people have a much better ability to observe livestock and have that natural, eye of the master to detect animals that don't look quite right. So those type of people belong in the animal agriculture business. So there's different types of diseases. There's non-infectious, infectious, and then there's, parasites. So one of the things that you have to know when you're going to be an animal scientist is I never can remember respiration rate or heart rate. I would have to look it up. And you can look this up on your phone. You can just Google it in a heartbeat, literally. So it doesn't take long to look this up. I do know all the body temperatures of animals, and that is important. Mainly I deal with sheep, but I also deal with cattle. I have horses and chickens, and so it's important to know. We don't usually take the temperature of a chicken, but knowing their body temperature is 107 degrees makes you realize they don't tolerate heat very well. But it is good to know the body temperatures, and it never ceases to amaze me, even with my sheep interns, who I would think would have some knowledge. A lot of times they have no clue what the normal body temperature of a sheep is, a lamb. So non-infectious diseases are diseases where microorganisms are not involved. So non-infectious doesn't have anything to do with being contagious, spreading, but non-infectious means that there's no bacteria or viruses or protozoan or fungal agents involved. So but they are considered diseases. So mechanical injury can be considered a non-infectious disease. And sometimes that can, an injury can become infected. It can become a route for bacteria to get into the body and cause an infection or even cause a disease, like tetanus, for example, from a puncture wound. So mechanical is a non-infectious disease. There's digestive diseases. You watch the video on the calf that was bloated. That's a non-infectious disease caused by, improper feeding or, some environmental condition where the calf isn't properly digesting its food. Non-infectious diseases can be caused by toxins like chemicals, an imbalanced ration that has too much of an ingredient Sheep are particularly sensitive to copper, or it could be non-infectious disease in the toxin category, could be caused by toxic plants. Non-infectious diseases would also be things like vitamin deficiencies. For example, we talked about animals that don't get enough vitamin D or calcium and phosphorus. They can get rickets, or their bones don't grow properly. Or animals that have goiter might have an iodine deficiency. And then another category of non-infectious diseases would be abnormal growths. And animals get cancers and tumors just like people do. So a disease that's infectious is caused by a microorganism. A lot of infectious diseases, an infectious disease may or may not be contagious. So a contagious disease is like COVID-19. It's spread rapidly from one animal to another. But sometimes infectious diseases are not contagious. For example, an infectious disease like tetanus is caused by a bacteria, but it isn't contagious. Or an infectious disease like overeating disease or enterotoxemia in sheep and goats is caused by a bacteria, but it's not contagious. So what type of infectious agents are there? Well, there's viruses. Viruses, of course, are the most dangerous of all infectious agents, I would say. Viruses typically cause the most serious diseases and diseases that have, life-threatening types of symptoms. So we probably know more about viruses right now than you ever cared to. But viruses have to reproduce inside a host, and they basically take over the DNA or the RNA of the cell and make that cell do what it wants to do. So viruses are very mysterious. They are very, they still aren't as well known and understood as, say, bacteria or some other infectious agents. So usually with infectious disease, they are typically, it says host and tissue specific. In other words, an infectious disease like a virus may affect only chickens. For example, avian influenza, that would be host specific, only affects chickens. And some viral diseases only affect certain body tissues, like maybe the respiratory system or something like that. And then some viruses have to be vectored, in other words, transmitted via another animal. And a good example of that might be, oh my gosh, I just lost my, what's the one that's transmitted by magpies and birds? West Nile. That might be a good example of a vector that's transmitted via mosquitoes. And that's, a disease that horses can get. So we talk about infectious disease. It can be caused by a virus, or they can be caused by bacteria. Bacterial diseases, the diseases that have bacterial cause, they aren't as deadly, because one of the things we have for bacterial diseases is we can fight them with antibiotics. Remember, viral diseases, they can be kind of slowed down by antibiotics, but we don't have very many antivirals in the animal veterinary world. Bacteria are more easily controlled by antibiotics, and that's one of the concerns in animal agriculture is the use of antibiotics, because we need strong antibiotic options to treat bacterial diseases. So a bacteria is like a single-celled organism, and a lot of times bacteria cause damage to tissues or organs by the production of toxins, and that you will learn about when you take microbiology. An example of a bacterial disease in lambs or calves is enterotoxemia, or overeating disease. Protozoa, I think that's plural, are single-celled, bigger than bacteria, microscopic animals, really. And they typically, they don't cause very many diseases in the animal kingdom, but the diseases they do cause a lot of times can be very devastating. The example of a very devastating disease in the poultry industry, the dairy industry, is coccidiosis, which is where the protozoan destroy the lining of the intestinal tract and cause severe diarrhea, dehydration, and a lot of times animals can even die. Fungi are even less common in terms of causing havoc, wreaking havoc in animal agriculture. Fungi can be single or multiple celled, and the fungus is generally in the order of plants. So when you think of a fungus, you probably don't think of a plant. Think of a mushroom. That's kind of what a fungus is. And a common fungal disease, whether you have cats or whether you have sheep, is ringworm. And in sheep, we call it club lamb fungus, but really it's just ringworm. And if you've been around animals at all, you may have got ringworm from them. So the spread of infectious diseases, we are very knowledgeable about this because of the current pandemic. So diseases obviously are spread by contact from other animals. So as a matter of biosecurity, if you feel an animal is sick, it's a good idea to isolate it from other animals. Obviously, this is always a concern, with people and horses, because there are diseases in horses that are very contagious. And a lot of times people will ride horses and they let all the horses drink out of the same water trough, which I've done my whole life. So I can't say I'm taking very good precautions there. But contaminated water source can spread disease. The ingesting of infected fecal matter, that is how coccidiosis is spread, by animals eating food that has poop on it. So that's why you want to keep your pens clean. I mean, animals aren't as picky as humans, right? They pull their hay out of their feeder, they step on it, and they eat it. And it might be a little tiny bit of fecal material, but that's how lambs and goats get coccidiosis. Like I said, some types of viral diseases are spread through mosquitoes, and even birds can vector very deadly diseases. Wild birds can transmit avian influenza. Viral diseases and bacterial diseases can be airborne. They can spread in the wind, and typically airborne diseases affect the respiratory system, or that's how they gain entry. Example in cattle of an airborne bacterially caused disease is anthrax. Another way that disease can be spread is through contaminated equipment or facilities, and that is especially true in swine and poultry. And the reason why is because poultry and swine are raised in large numbers in confinement. And if pigs have a disease, scours, diarrhea, or some other even worse viral disease, then if their pen isn't completely cleaned and disinfected, then that disease can easily spread to the next group of pigs that goes into that pen. So let's talk a little bit about parasites. When we talk about parasites, there are external parasites and internal parasites. So a parasite is an animal that lives off of another animal. An example of external parasites could be ticks. And as you know, if you have dogs, ticks can transmit Lyme disease. So not only are they irritating and painful for the animal, but they also allow other diseases to enter into the animal. Mites are a horrible problem. Dogs get mange, which is caused by mites, and cattle and horses in the wintertime a lot of times get lice, and that is an external parasite. Chickens get lice too. And don't worry, lice are pretty much host specific, so you're not going to catch lice from your chicken. Let's talk about internal parasites. So internal parasites, I just put a few down. Usually we just call these worms. And there's a lot of different kinds of worms. And when you look for a dewormer for your animal, it's important you kind of have an understanding of the names of the worms so you can see what they're killing. Tapeworms and roundworms are very common. Tapeworms and roundworms are very common in young animals. The barber pole worm, I put that one down because that is probably the single most devastating parasite in the sheep and goat industry. And that is worth remembering. And then liver flukes are another type of parasite. They don't really look like a worm. They're kind of interesting looking. So here's a picture of some internal parasites. Here's the barber pole worm. You can tell why it's called the barber pole worm because it has those little stripes on it. This is a tapeworm. Tapeworms are segmented. After looking at these, you're probably not going to want to eat pasta for dinner tonight. And the segments are actually egg-filled, and they pass the segments in their fecal material. So sometimes you can actually see those